So what this session is, it's agent or process. And my team, the CS Innovation team, has been working with customers over the past several years to adopt the latest Appian technologies. And one thing we've learned along the way is there are certain use cases that are a good fit for AI and process, and there are certain use cases that are good fit for agents, and then there's other use cases that are just a good fit for process. It's going to be simple. I don't think we're going to take the whole hour or the whole 45 minutes here, so we'll leave some time for questions, some discussion about use cases, and if we finish early, we can get you on your way. And with that, we're going to go to the unvarnished truth. So unvarnished truth is that 40% of agentic processes or agentic projects will be canceled by 2027. And there's good reason for this. And the good reason for this is that teams aren't great at picking out what are good use cases for AI agents and what are good use cases for just AI calls within process. And we're going to go over what those steps are, the methodology you'll want to apply. We'll even have a quick trivia/quiz in the middle of the presentation to make sure you all are great at picking out agentic use cases. So a bit about our agenda. We're going to talk about the AI tools available in Appian. So that's going to be your AI agents, which are available in Designer. That's going to be your AI skills. That's going to be your doc center, and we're going to cover those. We're also going to talk about how to build better AI applications by building the right tool for the job. We're also going to talk about real design patterns from the field. Victor Diaz is going to go into 5 design patterns that we have. And then we're going to talk about what's next in agentic capabilities in the platform. So one thing I've noticed is there's a bit of an identity crisis when it comes to agentic AI. And what I've found is a lot of software vendors are using agentic AI for everything, even for well-defined back office processes. And that's something you absolutely should not use agentic AI for. So if you know the flow, if you can diagram the steps, if you can have someone describe to you the steps, that's definitely an AI and process use case, or just a process use case for that matter. So one advantage that Appian has is Appian does have workflow capabilities that agentic providers do not have. So we don't have to make everything an agentic use case. And there's a lot of disadvantages to agentic use cases. One, agents are going to consume, regardless of the platform, a large amount of tokens. Agents are also going to be non-deterministic. The decision might be different on subsequent invocations of the agent, and they're going to take a large amount of time. So there's many reasons why you would not want to use an agent for a particular solution. So keep in mind when you hear from other vendors that something's an agentic use case, it's probably an agentic use case for them because they don't have workflow technology or they don't have a sophisticated rules engine. So let's level set on what the definition is for AI agents. So with AI agents, you have a set of goals, and then you have instructions for accomplishing those goals. And then you're going to have context, and you're going to have data. So with Appian, that's going to be the data fabric. And then you're also going to have tools that will help you accomplish those goals. And again, in Appian, those tools can be process models, those tools can be other agents, those tools can be process models, those tools can be web services. So there's a large amount of tools available in Appian for you to use with your agents. Again, there's a large amount of data that's available to you from the data fabric. And the agent is going to follow the same set of guidelines that you have for any other Appian object. So the security that you have in place, your agents are going to honor that security. Another thing to keep in mind is that the agent's going to iterate until it accomplishes its set of goals. So we've had scenarios where to accomplish a set of goals, it might need to go through 20 or 30 iterations. But in that particular situation, a person would have needed to go through those same 20 or 30 iterations. All right, let's go with the next slide. So here's our framework for when to use process, for when to use agents. So again, an agent is not a catch-all tool for all your use cases, all your applications. And again, any vendor or software provider that tells you that just has a deficiency in how they do business rules and how they build out workflow. So you're going to want to use process models when the steps are well defined. So again, if you can draw this out on a diagram, that's a good use case for process models. If variability is unacceptable, so if you run process the same way 100 times, it's going to run the same way 100 times. An agent is, again, non-deterministic, and it might have some non-predictability or unpredictability to it. Another thing is going to be runtime performance is critical. So if you need it to run fast and you can't have latency in the process, you're going to have to use process. So agents, there are good use cases for agents, and again, we'll get into those, but some of those good use cases for agents are when it's highly variable. So for example, have had use cases where 80% of the workflow goes one way, but then the rest are exceptions. And those exceptions may number in the hundreds of cases. So in that particular scenario where it's highly variable for those exceptions, that's a great use case for agents. Another good use case for agents is when you're going to have a human in the loop. So if the outcome is variable, but someone's going to check that, that's another good use case for an agent. So let's go through, is this a good agent use case? The first one's going to be service request management. And it sounds dynamic, but if you think about it, is it really dynamic, or do you really follow the same set of steps each time? Do you have an email intake, or do you have an intake in a form or an application? And then do you go from the same status to researching, to open, to resolution, to close? Would that be a good agent use case? No. Right? That would not be a great agent use case because, again, it's a series of predictable steps that takes the same flow every single time. Okay, here's another one. Invoice extraction. So if you have a invoice and you need to get a set of fields out of that, it's highly structured data. It's going to be the same data you get out of that invoice each time. Agent use case or not? No, exactly. Not a good agent use case. Again, I mean, if you try to do this in agent, I mean, it would just be a waste of tokens. It would be inefficient. It would take longer to do than it would do in process, and it's just not a great use case. So here's an interesting one. So let's say you need to assign hardware and software to a new hire based on a geography, a set of policies, and for each employee, it's going to be different. It's highly variable, and it can take some time as you kick off the process before the employee joins, agent or not. Yes, right? Exactly. So let's go through a few more and just, again, get some good practice to identifying these good agent use cases. And again, remember the strengths of the Appian platform. If it's highly predictable, if it's going to be the same set of steps each time, it's going to be a great use case for in process. Okay, so new account opening. Let's go through this one. And this is kind of interesting, and I'd be curious to hear you all's take on this. This might be one that's up for a bit of debate. So let's say someone opens a new account, but depending on their region, their state, there might be a different set of documents that they have to upload. It's going to be highly variable, but there's going to be someone to check it. What do we think? Yes, right? So I think this would be a great use case. In fact, this is one of our more common use cases that we see, and Victor Diaz is going to talk about the rules checker design pattern, and this is actually a really great use case for that design pattern. Now this is an interesting one, support email responses. So in theory it could be, right, because you're researching a knowledge base, you're retrieving information on past cases, but here's the key, replying to new support emails. Now, would you let an agent respond to support emails for external customers without a human in the loop? No, right? And maybe, right? So I would not do it, but with here, what it's saying is if there's a human in the loop, it's well managed, you have the structure of process, and this is maybe a good use case for agents. So it's all about how you implement it. And the last one I'll throw in here, medical claim decisioning or loan decisions. Would you use an agent for that? So I wouldn't, just because there might be some regulatory reasoning behind not doing that. Again, the key here is make sure you have a human in the loop to make the final decision with that. So again, Victor Diaz, he's going to go through some patterns that we see with agents. And these are common patterns. So what I want you to do as he's going through these patterns to start to think of use cases that you might have. Because what I want to do after that is have an interactive discussion about use cases you might have with your customer or with your line of business themselves, and then we can discuss as a group, is this a good agent use case? How would we build it? But what we're going to do first is you're going to go through the patterns and then start to think about, do you have any use cases that fit those patterns? All right.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, all. Now we're going to see 5 AI patterns that work for agents, and when do they work, and in which context do they work best for agents. We have 5 of them. The first one is the documented procedure. This is a very common use case where the companies that we see, they usually have some documents with a standard operational procedure. They may have playbooks, they may have user manuals with a set of instructions for the users to know how to perform a task, okay? So now with agents, we can leverage the intelligence of the agent to just take those documents with all the instructions, and the agent is going to be intelligent enough to read the document, understand what's going on, and to solve the problem and to perform the task, provided for sure that we need to give the agent some tools to perform the task, but the agent is going to leverage its intelligence to really know what to do without us having to define a static workflow with all the possible steps. So I think that whenever we see in our processes some documents with instructions, we could start thinking on, okay, is this a good use case for an agent? Could we use an agent to perform this task? That's a good place to start usually. Okay, we have another pattern. The pattern number 2 is called agentic retrieval. In this case, what usually we have is a user performing some searches, but are not simple searches, but complex search where the user needs to think on what to do next. So for example, let's say we have a ticketing system and we receive a ticket and we want to search in our systems if we have already something similar to that ticket that we solved in the past, okay? So we need to potentially look in different systems and modify the search terms, modify the criteria. The agent is really a good fit for that because it's going to be intelligent to know where to look for, when to change the criteria, and when it finds a match or there are no matches for that. So again, in this case, we see how we can leverage the intelligence of the agent to decide what to do next without us having to explicitly tell the agent what to do step by step. So this is another really good use case for an agent, another good pattern for an agent. The third one is the doc center an agent. I think probably this is the most common use case that we find in our customers because we have documents all over the place, isn't it? All the processes have documents, and most of the time we want to extract information from those documents. So this case could go either way. We could need an agent for this or maybe not, depending. And depending on what? Do we need the intelligence of the agent? For example, if we have an invoice and we want to extract the information from the invoice, and we are always going to extract the same fields, the number of the invoice, the amount, the date, and then we are always going to store that information in the database, we could use an agent for this, for sure. The agent is going to be able to do it. But maybe it's not the best fit because it's like a little bit overkill. We don't really need an agent for that. But on the other hand, if we have, let's say, a more complex set of fields that we want to extract, and depending on the context, I may want to extract something or the other thing, or maybe dive deeper. And if I see this information here, I may want to extract this kind of fields. But if I see other type of information, I may want to go other place to extract other fields. And afterwards, maybe I want to do different things depending on the information I have extracted, just store it here or there or not store it at all. That's what the agent is for, to decide what to do in runtime without having to tell all the instructions one to one. So this use case, depending on the context, depending on the complexity of what we want to do, could be a good fit for an agent, or maybe just use Doc Center with a process model and we are good to go. Okay? So again, when we see documents in our processes and we want to extract information, we may want to think, is this complex enough for an agent, or just Doc Center is good enough? Okay? The fourth pattern is the AI rules checker. We see this a lot. We usually have a set of information, usually it's a document, and we want to know if the document passes a set of rules, and to decide if the rules matches the document or not. So let's say that rule number 1 passed, rule number 2 failed. Just in a similar way as the use case before, we may want to use an agent for this, or maybe not. If I'm always going to compare the document and to match the same set of rules and always going to do the same thing, we could just use the non-agentic mode. By the way, this is an application that is available in the app market. So if you want to try it, just download it, install it, and it's ready to go. It has 2 modes, agentic or not agentic. When do we want to use the agentic mode? When it's a really complex set of rules and we need some intelligence to decide which rules to apply, and maybe it's a complex set of documents and we are not going to apply all the rules to all the documents. That kind of intelligence to know what to do is where we need the agents for. Okay? So this is another use case that could go either way depending on the complexity. And the fifth one, the last one, is, well, it's not so much a pattern, but just this idea of what we are trying to transmit here is that we all know that in Appian we have a lot of different tools. And as Appian developers and architects, we know all the tools. And I think our job is to understand all the tools that we have at our disposal and to decide one by one for each of the use cases, for each of the tasks that we need to accomplish, which is the best tool to use. Okay, so let's say that we have a big end-to-end process. And for example, in the first part of the process, we may want to go without AI at all, because it's always going to be the same steps. And I don't really need artificial intelligence for this. I can just establish a set of expression rules and a process model, and that's fine for that part of the process. But maybe afterwards, I have some documents, and I need to extract information from the document. Well, for that part of the process, we may want to use Doc Center or maybe an agent. But usually Doc Center is good enough. And let's say that afterwards, when we have the information, depending on something, I may want to do some sub-process that I want to do it without AI, or I may want to use an agent because I already have some written document with all the instructions for that part. And usually, as we said before, if we already are using artificial intelligence in the process, we may want to add that final step that is putting the human in the loop and making the human take the final decision. Again, this is not always going to be the case because sometimes the process is not critical, and sometimes I can let the agent or the AI skill do its thing without really too much overview. But most of the cases, the process is critical enough that we don't really want the agent to take the final decision. So what the agent is going to do is to provide suggestions, and the final step is going to be performed by the human, who is going to read the suggestion, and is going to agree or not, and is going to click the final button, is going to push the button of, okay, I agree, we are going to do this, or we are not going to do this. So whenever we see these critical processes, we may want to consider to put the human in the loop, which is easy with Appian, just a human task for that. Okay, so hopefully with these 5 patterns, you already have some ideas of what you want to do, some things that you may have in your processes that you want to try with agents, and that's good. That's what we are here for. But in case you don't know yet what to do, you don't have ideas, what we think is the best place to start if you want to implement an agent is to start with what you already have. So you start with your current applications that you already have in production running, you already have data for them, you already know what they do, and you look for places where you have human tasks, manual tasks in those processes. Okay? And you take the list of all the manual tasks and you decide for each of them if you could replace the human intelligence in that task with an artificial intelligence. If you decide that no, this needs to be performed by a human, that's okay. But if you decide that you can replace the human intelligence by an artificial one, then you need to go a step further and decide which is the right tool, which is the right AI flavor, let's say. So we need to decide, as we said before, it's a simple process and don't really need more intelligence. I already know what I need to do, then we could go without an agent. But if it's a complex process that is going to be decided, what to do is going to be decided in real time, then that's a best suit for an agent. Or maybe I don't have all the information available in the process and I need to search for more information in real time. Another good use case for an agent. Or if I have a written document with instructions, we already saw the first pattern. So depending on the task, we need to decide, it's better to use DocCenter, AI skill, or an agent. Okay? So, okay, hopefully you already have some ideas, and if not the case, if that's the case, we can discuss now, because I think it's going to be very interesting. Mark, would you like to give the floor to you?
Yeah, sure. All right, so let's have a group discussion on, do you have an agent use case? So you've heard Victor talk about the 5 various patterns. Does anyone in the room have ideas they want to talk about in front of the group? I know we've seen a couple in the various industries, and maybe we can even provide some more specifics. Oh yeah, okay, sorry.
I'm Arpit from Capital Group Companies. We do have one use case where we want to integrate agent with MCP server so that it can go in and just read the messages from Teams or check the emails, like how associates from the business side are discussing about any of the account onboarding and whatnot. And based on it, just gather the information and insights and go into Appian, take the actions, and then respond back into Teams or over the email.
Well, that's interesting. So you talked about MCP server. I mean, that's some future functionality that we're looking at, but your idea is to have the agent in Appian. So what would trigger the agent in Appian in your use case? I see. So you have an agent that's essentially continually listening in Appian on the Teams, so the Teams chat exactly is deciding when to take action. And that's kind of interesting. So basically you're saying that if the message is pertinent to Appian, pertinent to a process in Appian, then it would kick off a process. So we've done similar types of functionality without MCP, because that's not in the product just yet. And we've done that with some Teams integrations, but we've had to be a bit creative on that, meaning that in the Teams, we've had to trigger it from the Teams through a service call into Appian. But those are the types of use cases I think MCP is going to open up. So for example, I guess if you have something around, you want to kick off some type of request within Appian based on the conversation inside of Teams, that's what you would do. Right, that's what they're. Right, that's essentially what they're doing as a workaround now before you have the MCP, which once you have the MCP, then the decision would become, do you make that decision on the team side whether to invoke the services that are available in Appian? Because theoretically when you have MCP, it will say, okay, I have account opening or I have open an IT request. And that's how I'd envision that working. So in that scenario, the agent would live outside of Appian that communicates with the Appian agent that lives inside of Appian because you're exposing the services that it has through the MCP protocol. Keyword is how that was working. Yeah, that's how that's working now until we get the MCP. All right, any others? Any public sector use cases or any life science use cases that are out there? Or any education use cases? And you all can think. We'll have some time during the question and answer as well where you can, again, put the question to the group and see what everybody else thinks as far as the good use cases go. So one thing I did want to call out is we now have monthly releases of our AI capabilities. I mean, technology is moving so fast that we have to have the monthly releases. And one thing we do have in the monthly releases is we update the best practices. So as the technology updates, as it changes, as we add new features, we're going to update those best practices. So the good use cases for an agent are going to evolve over time. A new capability we have in 26.3, so we haven't quite announced 26.4 yet, is we have agents as tools, so meaning you can have agents call other agents. So that's something that's going to be important. Something as far as discoverability goes is we're making it easier for agents outside of Appian to understand the metadata that's inside of Appian. So we added a new function that basically exposes the fields available within various records types. So that way, and again, you have to kind of do a workaround now where you have to expose a web service, but that's really kind of the precursor to an MCP type of solution. But what you can do is you can query Appian as a third-party service. Okay, what record types are available? And then of those record types that are available, what fields are available within those given record types? And then once you have those fields, then you can do your query record type to get that information back. So this is an amazing feature that's going to make it much easier for third-party agents to play nicely with Appian's data fabric. So that was released in 26.3. So one thing I wanted to cover is agent orchestration, and that's a capability or a topic we're not really getting into in this presentation, but I'd be remiss if I just didn't bring it up. It's Appian's opinion that agent orchestration happens best with a process to coordinate your agents, and the reason being is that gives you more control over the agents, that gives you governance, that gives you transparency. So there's many advantages you get by orchestrating your agents through process. And that's commonly how we're doing that within Appian with our projects. So you'll have the execute agent smart service that happens within an overall and even larger process. And we're actually doing a case study on this with Constellation Energy tomorrow at a similar time. So we're going to have Constellation Energy talk about their business use case. And it's actually a pretty interesting use case on how they use agents to audit their training materials. So their training materials continually have to be updated, and there's a certain set of standards that their training materials have to fit. And with thousands of training materials, it really helps to have an agent keep those in control. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the business case, and then we're going to talk about some of the implementation details there. Some other things I wanted to call out was Appian Academy. So we have training materials with Appian Academy. There's also an AI skill badge. So especially if you're a partner, you can show off your skills to the community. Customers are going to start to ask for partners that have this AI skill badge because that's going to represent that you have some of the skills that we're talking about here. So for example, you're going to know about Doc Center, you're going to know about identifying a good agent use case. You're going to know about identifying a good AI and process use case. AI agent documentation, again, I want to repeat here again that it's going to continually update with each monthly release, so you want to make sure you stay on top of that. And then, of course, session surveys, so make sure you fill this out so you can help us come up with better content for these DevCon sessions. We tried something a bit different with this session. Instead of focusing on demoing and showing off the functionality, we decided to talk more theory-based and about what our experiences were in the field, but if you have suggestions, we do read all of those comments. All right, and I'm going to leave about 5 minutes for questions, but I did promise I'd get you all out of here early. I know there's like a public sector welcome reception starting at 4. There's a live build challenge, so there's a lot of excitement starting after this, so I don't want to hold you all back from that, but if you do have questions, feel free to ask either myself or Victor. And she has a microphone back there. I don't see a question yet. Oh, go ahead.
Can you share the most interesting use case that you've seen?
Yeah, I can share my most interesting use case, and then Victor, you can talk about yours. So, I mean, one of my more interesting use cases, and it's always been because like building architecture has been fascinating for me, but we had a customer that worked with real estate developers and architects to get CAD documentation in, and they needed to review that CAD documentation to make sure it was in good order. And I didn't think that was originally going to be a good use case for the AI technology that is available right now. And what we did was we gave the agent a very specific set of instructions on how to act like an architect, what to review for in certain set of diagrams, and the accuracy we're able to achieve in the first pass for those reviews, just to make sure it was the right type of CAD documents that were submitted, was actually fairly high. And one of the business impacts was it was reduced the amount of time it took to actually do a review because they were able to get the correct documents submitted on time. So instead of having a back and forth, okay, you didn't attach the right documents, wait 3 days, get the newest documents, the architects that were uploading the diagrams got the immediate feedback.
Okay. In my case, I'm thinking, on top of my head, I'm thinking one that we use, the AI rule checker. I think it's really interesting because of how quick we started implementing it and how quick we could finish it. Just installing the application. This was not about documents. It was information that they already had in the database for audits. In this company, they perform audits, and they had a lot of big text fields for the audit, and they wanted to check if those fields were complete. And they had a really, well, not so big, but maybe 5 to 10 different set of rules that they want to check. And it was really simple just to install the AI rule checker from the app market and just configure the rules, and you start working right away. So I think that's really a really easy way to start working with that.
Oh yeah, you brought up a good point. Yeah, the document compliance checks are just amazing how much faster they are with the agent technology and the AI technology. So we've had companies that have said that when invoices come in, they want to check to see if their SOWs, if they match the terms of payment in there. And again, the agents are able to follow kind of that set of instructions. Like they'll say, hey, when this invoice comes in, I want you to confirm that it matches our SOW. And it's just a natural language instruction you're providing, which really changes the way you do things with technology now versus just having to write out all of the rules and all of the decisions and expression rules. You're leveraging natural language. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Any others? I said, yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I'm Lavanya from Merck. I know we've been more focused on the AI agents and AI skills, but our process model is more complex, and there are a lot of areas where sometimes it gets delayed and sometimes we are on time, so some of the processes. Is there a way that we can do predictive analysis using AI? And do you think it would be a good use case for AI agents or in general AI capabilities that's already available in Appian?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when I think predictive analytics, I go directly to like machine learning methods like logistic regression or some of the other tools you have in that toolkit, which aren't what agents are. They're more generative technologies. But one thing I've found is that if you pass in a specific set of examples, so for example, when you're trying to make your prediction, I'm sure there's like a set of features you're providing to the model, and then there's like a prediction that you're trying to make. Like, do you have more kind of details on that, or you're able to share in front of the audience?
Not really at this time. Maybe I can probably...
Yeah, we can have a follow-up because I know you
Yeah.
work closely with Gaurav and some of the others in customer success.
Yes.
So we can have a follow-up session.
Okay, that would be
That's good. But yeah, it is kind of interesting, that line between predictive analytics and then LLMs, where you do that in-context learning and you provide information from previous cases to the LLM. And there's often times where the LLM has fairly comparable performance to some of the machine learning methods out there. So we can talk more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just to follow up to the predictive, if we can do an operate versus, if you can use the example of operate versus replace and still, just extend your answer on the predictive analytics. If you want to do an operate versus replace using Appian here, just an extension to what you were saying.
Let me make sure. So my key thing is if you can provide like 2 or 3 examples in context to the large language models. I mean, there are certain scenarios where it can get close enough to what the machine learning model is. I mean, the machine learning models oftentimes is going to perform better, but that involves like a data science team, that involves actually having the data available to you, and that it also requires continually to retrain the model and monitor the model to make sure it's performing correctly. So there's certain scenarios where we've tried where we've actually provided like examples to the agent so it can use that to predict that on existing data. But that's something you would just have to try and just see what your accuracy is and if it's acceptable to the business.
What are the limitations from the scalability standpoint? So like, we run into the issue when we were using the AI, like 2 million tokens per minute and 200 requests per minute at the instance level or at the infrastructure level. Like, what are the limitations from the agentic framework?
So the agentic framework, we're making changes to it that are going to be announced, I think, tomorrow. So those numbers are going to change. So I'm not in products. I don't have those numbers, okay. But we're updating the framework because we have heard feedback from customers like you, and we're making changes to improve that. So there's going to be a new framework behind that's going to get announced.
Because when we were using the Agent Studio, like one call would take 6 minutes or 7 minutes, and
yeah.
we are talking about the 1,000 of the instances to be run in a given day. And the tokens it uses, oh my gosh, 150K or so and whatnot. Like 10 calls would just exhaust 1 million tokens. So it's pretty expensive operation.
Absolutely. So that was one of the main feedbacks from the early adopter program, which is the program both of him and I were on, was the performance. So that's something where are going to have a new engine, and we're going to talk more about how that's going to impact things. But yeah, I mean, the way it was working before was not great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Any others? Great discussion. I've taken the whole hour, which is great. All right, well, looks like if there's no other questions, thank you so much for participating. This was a lot of fun, and enjoy the rest of the conference.